a nation born from revolution, torn apart by war, and built on a controversial dream. This is the true complex story of how America became a superpower designed to help you master English. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. A long time ago, maybe around 15,000 years ago, the land we now call America was already home to many people. We call them Native American tribes. They were the very first people to live on this land. These tribes were hunters, and they were gatherers. They traveled across a special bridge of land that once connected Asia to North America. They lived in a beautiful harmony with nature, growing their food hunting animals for survival and building their own unique and wonderful cultures. But the story of America, as many people know it today, starts much later. In the year 1492, an Italian explorer named Christopher Columbus decided to set sail on a great adventure. He was looking for a new, faster way to get to Asia. But instead of Asia, his ships landed in the Americas. This long and expensive journey was paid for by the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella. When Columbus arrived, he believed he had reached India, and because of this mistake, he called the native people he met Indians. However, it's important to know that Columbus wasn't actually the first European to reach America. Almost 500 years before him, brave explorers from the north, the Vikings, led by a man named Leif Erikson, landed in what is now Canada. But their small settlements, their new homes, didn't last for very long. So Columbus is the one who is often remembered for discovering America, because his journey was the one that brought all of the European attention to this huge continent. After Columbus returned to Europe with stories of a new world, a rush began. More and more explorers came from all over Europe. Countries like Spain, France, and England sent their ships across the ocean to claim land. Spain focused its attention on South and Central America, and there they found a lot of gold and silver. England and France began to build their own colonies or settlements in North America. These European settlers brought many changes to the land and to the lives of the Native American people. They introduced new kinds of foods, new animals, and new technology. But they also brought something terrible with them: diseases. These new sicknesses sadly killed many Native Americans. This was the start of a very complex and often painful relationship between the European settlers and the native people who had been there for thousands of years. In the year 1607, England established its first permanent colony in America. It was called Jamestown, and it was in a place we now call Virginia. The life for these first settlers was incredibly difficult. They faced harsh cold winters, new diseases, and a constant lack of food. It was a struggle just to survive. But they did survive. Soon, more colonies were formed. People from all over Europe began to dream of moving to America for a better life. One of the most famous groups to make this journey was the Pilgrims. They came to America in the year 1620 on a famous ship called the Mayflower. They were leaving England because they were facing religious persecution. This means they were being treated badly because of their beliefs. They wanted the freedom to worship as they wished. They landed in a place that is now Massachusetts. Their first winter was very hard, but they were helped by the local Native Americans. Together they celebrated the first Thanksgiving, a moment of friendship and gratitude for the food they had. So why was America so important to so many people? By the 1700s, America had become a land of opportunity. It was a place where people from all over Europe believed they could find freedom, own their own land, and start a new life. But this new beginning was not easy at all. Different European countries were fighting with each other for control of America, especially England, France, and Spain. By the 1700s, there were 13 colonies along the east coast of what is now the United States. These colonies were ruled by Britain, and they were generally grouped into 3 regions. First, there were the New England colonies like Massachusetts and Connecticut. These colonies were known for their deep forests, their fishing industry, and their small farms. In these places, people often worked together in close communities to help each other survive and succeed. Second, there were the middle colonies like New York and Pennsylvania. These colonies were often called the breadbasket of America. This was because they grew a lot of wheat and other grains. The middle colonies were also home to many different cultures and many different religions, all living together. Third, there were the southern colonies like Virginia and Georgia. These colonies had very large farms, which were called plantations. On these huge plantations, they grew crops like tobacco rice and cotton. But this brings us to a tragic and cruel part of America's history. Much of the hard work on these plantations was done by enslaved Africans. Life in the colonies was not easy. People had to build their own homes from scratch, grow all of their own food, and find ways to survive the long, cold winters. Families had to work very hard together, and children often helped their parents with chores on the farm or in the home. Schools were rare, and only a small number of children were lucky enough to learn how to read or write. But the colonies were also a place filled with hope. People came to America because they wanted things they couldn't have in Europe. Religious freedom, a piece of land to call their own, and the opportunity to build a better future. Some colonies, like Pennsylvania, were even founded to be safe places for people of all religions to live together in peace. Even though the colonies were across the ocean in America, they were still ruled by Britain. The King of England at the time, King George III, was the one who made the laws for the colonies. And the colonists, the people living in America, had to pay high taxes to Britain. Slowly, the colonists started to feel angry about this. They felt it was unfair. They didn't have anyone in the British government to speak for them, no one to represent their interests. So they came up with a famous saying, "No taxation without representation." This meant they believed it was wrong to pay taxes if they did not have a voice in making the laws. One of the most famous examples of this growing angers, the Boston Tea Party. In 1773, a group of colonists decided to protest a British tax on tea. They dressed up like Native Americans, snuck onto the British ships in Boston Harbor during the night, and threw all the boxes of tea into the water. It was a bold act of protest. By the middle of the 1700s, the colonists were growing tired of being controlled by Britain. They wanted to be free. They wanted to make their own laws and their own decisions. In the year 1775, a war began. It was a war between the 13 colonies and the powerful nation of Britain. This was called the American Revolution. The colonists were led by brave leaders like a man named George Washington. He became the commander of the American Army. Another very important figure was Thomas Jefferson. He was a gifted writer, and he wrote a very famous document called the Declaration of Independence. This document, which was written on July 4, 1776, declared to the world that the colonies were no longer a part of Britain. They were now free and independent. The Declaration of Independence said that all people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This was an incredibly bold move. It meant that the colonies were now in a full war with one of the most powerful countries in the world. The war was extremely tough. The British Army was big, very well trained, and had lots of weapons. The American colonists, on the other hand, were mostly farmers, shopkeepers, and regular people. They had very little military training. But they had something very important, something powerful, a strong belief in freedom. They also received help from other countries. France, which was a rival of Britain, decided to help the Americans. They sent soldiers, weapons, and ships, which made a huge difference. After years of difficult fighting, the Americans finally won a very important battle in a place called Yorktown, Virginia in 1781. 2 years later, in 1783, Britain officially recognized the United States of America as an independent country. After the war was over, the United States of America was born. The leaders of this new country came together to write the Constitution. The Constitution is like a set of rules for how the country should work. It is the foundation of the American government. They also elected George Washington as the very first president of the United States in 1789. This was the beginning of a new nation, a country built on the powerful ideas of freedom, equality, and democracy. However, it is very important to remember that these wonderful ideas did not apply to everyone at that time. Enslaved people, women, and Native Americans were not treated as equals. It would take many, many years of struggle and sacrifice to make progress toward true equality for all people. Now that the United States of America was born, it was time for it to grow. But this growth was not simple. It involved new opportunities, but also very difficult challenges, and a very dark chapter in American history. Slavery. After the War of Independence, the United States was still quite small. It was made up of just those original 13 states along the East Coast. But the American people had big dreams. They wanted to expand their country to the west and explore the vast open lands of the North American continent. In 1803, something extraordinary happened. President Thomas Jefferson bought a huge piece of land from France. This was called the Louisiana Purchase, and it instantly doubled the size of the United States. This new land stretched all the way from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. It opened up endless opportunities for farming, for trade, and for exploration. To learn more about this huge new territory, President Jefferson sent 2 explorers named Lewis and Clark on a long journey. With the very important help of a Native American woman named Sacagawea, they traveled across rivers, over mountains, and through wide-open plains. They mapped the land and met many different Native American tribes along the way. This idea of moving west became very popular. It was known as manifest destiny. Many Americans believed that it was their destiny, their fate, to spread their way of life across the entire continent from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Families packed up all of their belongings into covered wagons and began the long, slow journey west to find new homes and new land. They faced many dangers on this journey, like harsh weather, wild animals, and very difficult terrain. However, this expansion was not fair to everyone. As the settlers moved west, Native American tribes were forced off their lands, the lands where their ancestors had lived for centuries. They were pushed onto smaller areas of land called reservations. This led to many sad and violent conflicts and a deep sense of loss for the native peoples whose way of life was changed forever. As America grew, so did its economy. The southern states in particular became very wealthy because of their large plantations that grew valuable crops like cotton and tobacco. But this wealth came at a terrible, terrible cost. The plantation owners used enslaved Africans to do all of the hard labor. These enslaved people were kidnapped from their homes in Africa and brought to America under the most horrifying conditions. Slavery was a brutal and inhuman system. Enslaved people were treated as property, not as human beings. They worked for very long hours in the hot fields, often under the scorching sun, and lived in terrible conditions. Families were torn apart, and enslaved people had no rights and no freedom at all. By the middle of the 1800s, America was becoming a deeply divided nation. It was split into two regions with very different views on the issue of slavery. In the North, most people believed that slavery was wrong. They wanted to end it and give every person a chance to live freely. Many people in the North worked in factories or owned small farms, so their economy did not rely on enslaved labor. In the South, the economy depended almost completely on slavery. The plantation owners argued that their wealth and their entire way of life would collapse if slavery was ended. This disagreement between the North and the South grew stronger and stronger over time. It started to feel like they were living in two completely different countries. During this time, many brave individuals fought against slavery. Some of the most famous were the abolitionists who worked tirelessly to end slavery in America. One of the most inspiring figures was Harriet Tubman. She was a woman who had escaped from slavery herself, and she became a leader in the Underground Railroad. This wasn't a real railroad with trains. It was a secret network of brave people and safe places that helped enslaved people escape to freedom in the North. Another very important figure was Frederick Douglass. He was a former slave who became a powerful writer and a moving speaker. He shared his own story with the world, and through his powerful words, he showed everyone the true horrors of slavery. Books also played a very big role in changing people's minds. A woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin. This book showed the people in the North just how cruel and terrible slavery really was. It was a story that touched the hearts of millions and made many people realize that they had to take action. By the 1860s, the tension between the North and the South reached a breaking point. The Southern states wanted to protect and keep slavery. The Northern states wanted to stop it from spreading and eventually end it. In 1861, the Southern states made a drastic decision. They decided to leave the United States and form their own country, which they called the Confederacy. This action started a terrible conflict called the Civil War. The Civil War wasn't only about slavery. It was also about the question of whether the United States should stay together as one single country, or if it should be allowed to split into two. However, slavery was at the very heart of the conflict. The president at the time was Abraham Lincoln. He led the North, which was also called the Union, and he believed deeply in keeping the country together and in ending slavery. The Civil War was one of the darkest and most painful times in American history. It lasted for 4 long years from 1861 to 1865, and it caused immense suffering. Soldiers fought in bloody battles. Families were torn apart with brothers sometimes fighting against brothers. Entire towns were destroyed. But the war also brought a hope for change. In 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This was a historic announcement that declared that all enslaved people in the Confederate States were now free. This was a huge turning point in the war and in the history of human freedom. But true freedom for everyone would not come until after the war finally ended. In 1865, the North won the Civil War. The Southern states rejoined the United States, and slavery was officially and forever abolished with the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. This was a giant step forward for the country. But the journey toward true equality was far from over. The formerly enslaved people, who were now called African Americans, faced many new challenges. They were free on paper, but they still had to deal with racism, deep poverty, and unfair laws. This period of rebuilding the country after the war was called Reconstruction, and it was a very difficult time for everyone. With slavery abolished, millions of African Americans were finally free. But this new freedom was not easy. Many stayed in the South working on the same farms for very little pay. Others decided to move to the cities in the North, hoping to find better opportunities and a fairer life. During Reconstruction, the United States government passed new laws to help African Americans. The 14th Amendment gave them citizenship. The 15th Amendment gave African American men the right to vote. For a short time, things seemed to be getting better. African Americans even held political positions and started their own schools. However, there was a strong and often violent backlash. Many white Southerners did not want African Americans to have equal rights. They created a system of unfair laws called Jim Crow laws. These laws were designed to keep black people separate from white people and to treat them as unequal. This period was full of struggle, but it also marked the beginning of a long, brave fight for civil rights. During the late 1800s, America experienced a massive transformation. This period is often called the Industrial Revolution. So what was the Industrial Revolution? It was a time when machines and factories completely changed the way people worked and lived. Instead of working on farms, many people began moving to cities to work in factories to help build railroads to make steel and to create amazing new inventions. Think about electricity. Thanks to inventors like Thomas Edison, electricity became widely available. It started lighting up homes and powering all kinds of new machines. And what about the telephone? Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, which made communication much faster and easier. Railroads were built all across the country, connecting cities and towns. This made it possible to travel and to trade goods across very long distances. These inventions created new industries and millions of new jobs. But they also brought new challenges. Factory workers often had to work very long hours in dangerous conditions, and they received very little pay. Many of these workers were immigrants who had come to America hoping for a better life. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, millions of people from Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world immigrated to America. Many of them came through a place called Ellis Island in New York. There, they were checked for their health and then allowed to enter the country. These immigrants helped build the railroads, they worked in the factories, and they contributed so much to America's growth. But they also faced discrimination and poverty. Despite all the challenges, they held on to the idea of the American dream. The belief that anyone with hard work and determination could succeed in America. During this time, America continued to grow. The government encouraged people to move west by giving them free land through something called the Homestead Act. Settlers built farms towns and more railroads, turning the American West into a thriving part of the country. But again, this expansion came at a great cost to Native American tribes. They lost more of their land, and many were forced to live on reservations. The famous battle at Little Bighorn, where Native American leaders like Sitting Bull bravely resisted the U.S. forces, showed how deeply they fought to protect their land and their way of life. By the early 1900s, America had grown into one of the largest and richest countries in the world. Its factories produced goods that were sold all across the globe, and its military was becoming stronger. One important moment in America's rise to power was the Spanish-American War in 1898. This short war began when America supported Cuba's fight for independence from Spain. After winning the war, America gained control of territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. This marked the beginning of America's growing influence around the world. While America was growing richer, many of its workers were still struggling. Factory jobs were hard and unsafe, and sadly children were often forced to work instead of going to school. To fight for better conditions, workers started to form groups called unions. Unions demanded fair wages, shorter work hours, and safer workplaces. Leaders like Eugene V. Debs became champions for workers' rights. One of the most famous and tragic events during this time was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911. Many workers, mostly young women, died in the fire because of unsafe working conditions. This terrible tragedy led to new, stronger laws to protect the safety of workers. As America grew, African Americans continued their fight for equality. Leaders like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois had different ideas about the best way to achieve progress. Booker T. Washington believed in the power of education and hard work to gradually lift people up. W.E.B. Du Bois, on the other hand, believed in demanding immediate and full rights and equality. Their important work laid the foundation for the civil rights movement, which would come decades later. In 1914, World War I began in Europe. At first, America stayed out of the war, but in 1917, it decided to join the fight to help its allies like Britain and France. America's involvement in the war showed its growing power on the world stage. After the war ended in 1918, President Woodrow Wilson helped create the League of Nations, which was an early attempt to bring countries together to prevent future wars. By the 1920s, America was booming. This period, often called the Roaring Twenties, was a time of great excitement. There was new music like jazz and new progress. Women finally gained the right to vote with the 19th Amendment, and cities grew rapidly. But not everything was perfect. Many African Americans moved from the South to the North during what is called the Great Migration, hoping for better opportunities. But they still faced racism and segregation. The 1920s were a time of fun and excitement in America, but by the end of the decade, things began to fall apart. In 1929, the stock market crashed. Many people lost all of their money overnight, and businesses went bankrupt. This led to millions of people losing their jobs. Families struggled just to buy food and pay their rent. Banks began to run out of money, and many people lost their life savings. This terrible time was called the Great Depression. It was the worst economic crisis in American history. People stood in long lines for free food, which were called bread lines, and many people became homeless. How did America survive this difficult time? In 1933, a new president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR, took office. He created a series of programs called the New Deal to help people and to rebuild the economy. The government started jobs programs hiring people to build new roads, schools, and bridges. FDR also started Social Security, a system that gave money to older people who could no longer work. New laws were passed to help banks and farmers recover. FDR gave hope back to the American people through his fireside chats, which were radio talks where he explained his plans in simple, calming language. In the 1930s, while America was slowly recovering from the Great Depression, big trouble was starting in other parts of the world. In Europe, Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, was trying to take over other countries. In Asia, Japan was also invading its neighbors. At first, America tried to stay out of World War II, which began in 1939. But on December 7, 1941, everything changed. Japan launched a surprise attack on a U.S. naval base in Hawaii called Pearl Harbor. This attack shocked the nation. The very next day, America declared war on Japan, Germany, and their allies. On the home front back in America, everyone worked together to support the war. Factories stopped making cars and started making weapons and planes. Women, symbolized by the famous Rosie the Riveter, took on jobs that men had left behind to go and fight in the army. In 1944, a major turning point in the war happened. American and Allied forces landed in Normandy, France, in a massive operation called D-Day. They began to push back the German forces. In 1945, Germany finally surrendered. A few months later, the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, which quickly ended the war. World War II made America one of the most powerful countries in the world. Its economy was strong, and its military was unmatched. After the war, the world was divided into 2 main powers. On one side was the United States, which believed in democracy and capitalism. On the other side was the Soviet Union, or the USSR, which believed in communism. This intense rivalry was called the Cold War. It was called this because it wasn't a hot war fought with weapons, but a cold war fought with ideas, technology, and influence. One famous part of this rivalry was the space race. The US and the USSR competed to be the first to explore space. In 1969, the United States achieved an incredible goal and became the first country to land astronauts on the moon. In 1962, the world came very close to a nuclear war. The Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, which is only 90 miles from the US. This was called the Cuban Missile Crisis. After many tense days of negotiation, the crisis was resolved peacefully. The Soviet Union also built a wall that divided the city of Berlin in Germany. The Berlin Wall separated the Communist East from the Democratic West, and it became a powerful symbol of the Cold War. While America was growing stronger on the world stage, it still had deep problems at home, especially racism and inequality. Inspired by incredible leaders at Martin Luther King Jr., African Americans fought bravely for their rights in the 1950s and 1960s. This was the Civil Rights Movement. In 1954, a Supreme Court decision called Brown v. Board of Education made it illegal to have separate schools for black and white children. In 1955, a woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus to a white man in Montgomery, Alabama. This led to the Montgomery bus boycott, where African Americans refused to ride the buses for over a year to protest segregation. In 1963, over 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington. It was here that Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, sharing his vision of a future where people would not be judged by the color of their skin. The Civil Rights Movement led to very important new laws, like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which banned discrimination based on race, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which protected the right of all citizens to vote. By the 1970s and 1980s, America was a global leader in science, technology, and culture. It continued to face challenges like the difficult Vietnam War and economic struggles, but it also achieved great progress. So why is America so powerful today? One reason is its diverse population. Immigrants from all over the world bring their talent, culture, and new ideas. Another is its strong economy. The U.S. is a leader in technology, business, and education. It also has a powerful military and a strong cultural influence with its movies, music, and fashion being popular all over the world. Welcome to the final part of our story of America. In this last section, we will talk about the modern era. We will look at how America became a global leader, its culture, its diversity, and the challenges it faces today. Let's dive in. America is known as one of the most powerful and influential countries in the world. Let's explore why. First, its economy. America has the largest economy in the world. Its companies like Apple, Google, and Tesla lead the world in technology and innovation. Second, its military power. America's military is not just large, it is also highly advanced and with bases and friends all around the world. Third, its diplomacy. The U.S. works with other countries to solve global problems like climate change, security, and trade. America's culture is also famous everywhere. Think about Hollywood. American movies dominate theaters worldwide. Characters like Spider-Man and Wonder Woman are loved by people of all ages. In music, artists like Michael Jackson, Beyoncé, and Taylor Swift have become global icons. And of course, American fast food like hamburgers, pizza, and fried chicken is popular in almost every country. One of America's greatest strengths is its diversity. People from all over the world live in America. They bring their languages, their food, their traditions, and their ideas. This makes America a beautiful mix of cultures. This diversity is celebrated in festivals like Thanksgiving, the 4th of July, and many multicultural events where people share their traditions with their neighbors. America is often called the land of opportunity. This is because people believe that they can achieve anything here with hard work. This belief is called the American dream. Many people come to America as immigrants hoping for a better life. They work hard, and they contribute so much to the country's success. The stories of immigrants who achieve great success continue to inspire the world. Even though America is a powerful country, it faces challenges just like any country. Racism, for example. While a lot of progress has been made, racism still exists in some places, and the fight for true equality continues. There is also income inequality. Some people are very rich while other people struggle to make ends meet. Healthcare in America can be very expensive, and many people worry about how to pay for doctor visits and medicine. America is also working to reduce pollution and use clean energy like solar and wind power. But this is a very big challenge. And sometimes Americans disagree deeply about how to solve these problems. This can create tension between different political groups. America plays a very big role in addressing global issues. American scientists and engineers are always working on solutions for big problems like climate change diseases and even space exploration. Its universities like Harvard and MIT attract students from all over the world. And the U.S. often sends aid and help to other countries that are facing disasters or conflicts. America's future is full of possibilities. Young Americans today are passionate about making the world a better place. They are working on important issues like equality technology and protecting the environment. From artificial intelligence to space exploration, America continues to lead the way in creating the future. As America continues to celebrate its diversity, it will only grow stronger. So why is America so inspiring to so many people? I think it is because of freedom. People admire the freedoms that Americans enjoy, like the freedom to speak, the freedom to worship, and the freedom to dream big. It is also because of its resilience. Despite facing so many challenges throughout its history, America always finds a way to overcome them. And finally, its innovation. America's ability to create and to innovate inspires the entire world. America is not a perfect country, but it is a country that was built on hope, on dreams, and on hard work. Its history shows us that struggles can lead to growth, and that diversity makes a nation stronger. This concludes our journey through the history of America. From the first explorers to the modern era, America's story is one of resilience, courage, and dreams. As we have seen, America has gone through so many changes. But the journey does not stop here. America's future is still being written every single day by its people who continue to dream, to innovate, and to fight for a better tomorrow. The world often looks to America for leadership, for creativity, and for hope. Young people today are focused on making things better, fighting for equality, protecting our environment, and creating new technologies. As new challenges arise, America will face them with the same strength and determination that built the country. America is a place where dreams can come true, no matter where you come from. Its history shows us that with hard work, with hope, and with courage, anything is possible. The future of America is bright. It is full of possibilities, and it is up to all of us to make it even better.